Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Kimberley Hoeppner, and today is April 19th, 2017. When we're not here, you can always get our information by going to www.weather.gov/AJK or / for ANC Anchorage or AFG for Fairbanks. On your spare time, please feel free to check us out on the web pages. All the information that we're going to cover here in just a moment are available on those web pages, but you can still call our 1-800 number 472-0391 if you'd like to get your weather information via the phone. Now let's take a look at the topics today that are important across the region. We have areas across the central areas of the state, so the central interior, the upper and lower Yukon valleys is where we're concerned about winds gusting out of the north and northeast direction between 25 to 40 miles per hour, ending from north to west this evening around 10 p.m., but continuing across the Tanana Valley, the higher elevations surrounding this location through 10 a.m. on Friday. Now, let's look at the weather systems that are bringing the weather across the state today. You can see this clearing area over the state is a good indication that we have high pressure across the central interior areas of the state, and that's actually why those winds, and we'll look at the surface maps in just a moment. And across the southeast, if we take a look over here, you can see some moisture moving up towards the southeast, bring some light shower activity during the afternoon hours, with clouds spreading over towards Yakutat this afternoon. Across the northern northern areas of the state north of the Brooks Range, we do have a thick area of clouds as high pressure has kind of got in an inversion where we get that trapped moisture under the warmer air just aloft. Now across the western areas of the state, they stayed mostly clear as well. And mainly across the Bering, we do have two low pressure systems, one spinning here across the eastern Bering and one approaching the western Aleutians with the front just moving into Shemya this afternoon. So let's take a look at the map and let's go west to east. First, this area across Shemya, the surface low is coming up from the North Pacific and pushing some rain, a very warm system towards the western Aleutian chain. Meanwhile, low pressure across the eastern areas of the Bering is just primarily bringing some wraparound moisture. Some upper level waves are initiating some snow showers along the Bering with some rain along the eastern Aleutians and the western areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Now across the interior areas of the state, we have this ridge that's shifting down along Barrow, and this is bringing a very cold, dense air mass. So here in the whiter colors just along the Brooks Range, this is all dense fog, and that's noted across much of the eastern Beaufort Seacoast towards the northwest. Along the southern tier of the state, mostly sunny skies by this afternoon as clouds cleared away. However, we do have the low pressure that's sitting in the eastern areas of the Gulf, bring some light rain showers across areas at the surface. Only a few higher elevations are seeing some snow along this weakening trough. Now, as we head into the evening hours, no notable change other than some moisture advecting towards the north, so continuing ongoing light rain showers there across the eastern Gulf with snow up in the higher elevations. They're going to be creeping closer to freezing during the overnight hours. However, that's going to be during some breaks in the clouds. Coldest areas are going to be pretty much from Haines and Skagway on over towards Yakutat. Also, another clear and cold night for interior areas across the southern tier of the state, getting down below freezing as very much a persistent pattern, with a slightly colder temperature regime for the northern and western areas of the state. Along the eastern areas of the Bering, this low pressure system is just going to continue to sit and spin, with that front just moving a little bit closer to Shimia as it wraps up and becomes occluded on Thursday. So some very gusty winds out of this system will be primarily easterly to southeasterly gale force wind ahead of the low pressure, which will bring rain all the way through the central Aleutians. Along the coastal areas, look for fog developing overnight, with fog extending from around the Bering Strait area down towards Bristol Bay. And then along the Alaska Peninsula, they should stay on the clearer side of things, especially on the Pacific side. Now, for your Thursday for the southeast, this trough will be swinging back towards the Kenai Peninsula. However, the shower activity will primarily stay over the waters, with the activity being the heaviest in the morning for the southeast and then breaking up in activity during the afternoon. Very much the same trends across the central interior areas of the state. However, the ridging is going to be already pushed in, so the packing of the pressure gradient is going to be less. Therefore, those winds are going to be tapering off during the morning hours. Looking across the northwestern areas of the state, we're going to see this ridge staying, so expect the fog overnight to be possibly dropping visibility down to around the 1/4 mile range. Looking for improvement just during the afternoons with the diurnal heating trends. Across the western areas of the state, partly cloudy skies inland, with the patchy fog mainly across the eastern areas of the Bering, and shower activity continuing across the central and southern areas of the Bering, with rain mixed with snow towards the southern areas. Looking at your Friday forecast, low pressure is going to be moving up towards Kodiak Island. Now, this is going to be the next low pressure system, if you're a mariner, that you're going to want to keep an eye on, as we're going to have a very strong east to southeasterly flow as this system occludes on its way north. This will also bring some light shower activity back to the eastern areas of the Kenai and Kodiak Island, with some activity just making it a little bit further westward, possibly on the western side of the Kenai. Across the southeast, there will be a concern of some light showers that are going to be moving out ahead of the system, but the main thing to watch with the system initially is going to be the winds that you'll see increasing first. Across the central areas of the state, same conditions continue. This ridging will begin to shove off further to the east, and then we'll see some fog conditions redevelop on Friday morning across the north and northeastern Beaufort seacoast. Across the west coast, another quiet day. However, in the Kotzebue area, that is the area where they're seeing the most snow depth, which they still have 25 inches on the ground. So they do have temperatures cold enough to keep that snow in place, while the rest of the state is going to continue with the fast melt as the clouds break up during the afternoons. Now, across the eastern areas of the Bering, a colder air mass, which is currently in place, is going to continue in place through Friday. However, this low pressure system is going to begin to shift the pattern slightly. We will see some snow shower activity on the north side of this low as it moves into the southwestern areas of the Bering. Some very strong gusty flow along the boundary as it moves towards the central areas of the Aleutians, and then changing over to rain behind this boundary. Now, taking a look at your temperatures across the state this afternoon, primarily temperatures had gotten into the upper 40s to lower 50s all across the Gulf coastal areas, with 50 degrees across the Kenai and in the mid 40s across the Kodiak Island area. 53 was reported in Sitka this afternoon, with most of the southeast being a little bit cooler in the lower 40s, and then up to 50 there in Yakutat. across the interior areas of the state. They were a little bit on the cooler side with that ridge, colder air mass slipping through. We saw temperatures mainly in the mid-30s this afternoon. And then across the northern tier of the state where it was the coldest, still in the single digits for Wainwright and on over towards the northeastern Beaufort seacoast. The temperatures kind of increased across Norton Sound from the 20s to the 30s when you drop to the south. And across most of the southwest this afternoon, they were reporting temperatures in the mid-30s along the coast, with the interior areas seeing in the mid-40s. Across the Bering and Alaska Peninsula, temperatures were generally in the upper 30s to lower 40s. Looking at your temperatures for tonight, temperatures will be coldest, of course, across the north and western areas where that ridges moved in. They're going to see temperatures around the 0 range to 10 below, while the interior will drop into the single digits to lower and mid-teens. The southern tier of the state will see temperatures primarily in the mid to upper 20s, with the Bering seeing slightly warmer temperatures along the chain in the lower 30s. Colder there still across the Pribilof Islands with the colder air mass, they'll see temperatures in the lower 20s. Across the southeast tonight, temperatures will range in the 25 to 35 degree range, the coldest temperatures there to the north. And then as we head into your day tomorrow, temperatures are not going to quite warm up too much across the southeast. Once again, they'll have the cloud cover and showers keeping things a little bit cooler in the area. And then across the rest of the southern areas of the state, above normal temperatures in the upper 40s to lower 50s again. Across the northern tier of the state, temperatures may warm just a tad more than today, with temperatures in the mid-20s by the time you cross the Seward Peninsula into the mid-30s and mid-40s across Bristol Bay in the western areas of the state, staying primarily also in the mid-40s. Looking at your flying weather tomorrow, the biggest concerns are going to be across the high pressure in the north with IFR conditions widespread. And then along the Kotzebue Sound area, look for a small area of IFR and MVFR ceilings. Around low pressure across the eastern areas of the Bering with fog also in place, IFR and MVFR conditions will be a problem through the day, and also out towards the western areas of the Bering with that system approaching, they'll see MVFR and IFR conditions. Across the southeast, we'll primarily see MVFR conditions there with low pressure lingering through the day on Thursday. Now, as we look at your flying weather for the afternoon, the MVFR, like I said, widespread across the southeast, and your main concerns are actually going to be across the north of the Brooks Range with fog conditions there, the primary problem. And then also across the western areas of the Bering, we'll see MVFR widespread. Looking at your pass conditions for tomorrow, Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan should just be below the fog at VFR, and the southwest will see VFR conditions like Clark and Merrill Pass and also rainy. Looking for VFR across southern areas of the state like Windy and Isabel Pass, and also we'll see Mentasta, possibly see some MVFR late in the day. And then Tenedo will stay VFR all day, and Portage will be VFR. Looking at Chilkoot and White Pass in the MVFR range. And here's your freezing levels for tomorrow across the northern areas of the Bering, sinking down towards the Gulf locations. And then you have your 2,000 climbing to 4,000 feet across the Gulf of Alaska and across the western areas of the Bering, mainly in the 2,000-foot level. Now, looking at your icing, the primary concerns are going to be out towards the west, below 5,000 for the eastern areas of the Bering and Peninsula, and also below 5,000 for the western areas of the Aleutians, above 4,000 feet across areas of the southeast. Now, looking at your jet stream tomorrow, here's the ridge to the north with a 50-knot flow in between. And then we have low pressure system there dominating just to the west of the Gulf of Alaska and ridging the flow moving around a ridge there on the eastern side. Now the Bering primarily is under the influence of low pressure. Now that trough is also there at this 9,000 foot level across the eastern Bering, with ridging spreading all the way into the northern areas of the Bering. And now the Gulf, we're seeing a weak ridge pattern in the 9,000 foot level, and then also a very weak flow pattern at the 3,000-foot level over the Gulf, the southeast, and much of the southern tier of the state, with a weakening low-pressure system at the surface in the Bering. We also have the ridge at 3,000 feet. The flow is primarily north to east, between 10 to 25 knots across that area. Now looking at the western waters, the strongest flow is approaching with that low pressure system from the North Pacific. So here's your turbulence, just a little summary. Below 4,000 foot concern just southwest of the Brooks Range, and then out towards the west along the approaching front for tomorrow. Look at turbulence for those areas. Now in just a moment, we'll be back with your marine forecast.
By the year 2010, the FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, estimates approximately 1 billion passengers will travel on board commercial planes. As air travel increases, pilots are faced with more congestion on the ground and in the air.
And while pilots are ultimately in control of their own aircraft, it is the air traffic controllers who are directing them the moment the plane leaves the gate, keeping in constant communication as the plane travels en route.
Our own Johnny Alonso finds out how this complex system keeps our skies organized and our planes on schedule.
During peak air travel times in the United States, there are about 5,000 airplanes in the sky every hour, which is about 50,000 aircraft operating in our skies every day. From the time the plane pushes back from the gate until it arrives at the gate of its final destination, it is being handled by air traffic controllers. These controllers must coordinate the movements of thousands of aircraft, keep them at safe distances from each other, and direct them during takeoff and landing from airports. Air traffic controllers are also responsible for directing aircraft around bad weather and ensuring that traffic flows with minimal delay for both commercial and private aircraft. And I spoke with Gary Laurel from NASA Langley to find out how it works.
An air traffic controller is primarily tasked with separating airplanes. However, they do provide other services such as traffic advisories, weather information, and other status types of information for the National Airspace System.
What are some of the tools used by air traffic controllers?
Primary tool used by controllers for separation services is called radar, which stands for radio detection and ranging. And essentially what happens is from an antenna, a radio beam is transmitted, it bounces off the aircraft and is returned to the radar antenna, and there's a presentation on the radar display of which your position is based on that return. You can see behind us there's a display which is part of the radar system that controllers use, and your position as well as the position of other aircraft in the system will be presented on display and give the information the controller needs to provide air traffic services to you.
So, does one controller handle my plane while it's in the air?
There are a number of controllers that will handle your flight as you move throughout the system. Once you depart, your flight will be handed off to yet another controller, and that process continues throughout the duration of your flight. The primary delineation of what a controller is responsible for in a radar environment is called a sector. So as a controller works you through his or her sector, you'll be transferred to another sector where another controller will work you.
All right, so Gary, wait, walk me through this. What happens from departure to arrival, from gate to gate?
Assuming there aren't any delays, you'll taxi out to your departure runway, and there's a controller that issues taxi instructions and deconflicts you from other airplanes on the ground. There's a controller that will issue a takeoff clearance for you, and yet another controller that will work you as you're climbing to your cruise altitude. As a matter of fact, several controllers. As airplanes move from one sector to the next, there's a transfer of what we call control, and there's a transfer of communications, so that you'll be in communications with each controller along the way. And this process continues all the way to your destination airport, and you may talk to 10 or 15 different controllers en route to your destination. Prior to descending into the terminal area at your destination airport, there are several controllers involved in sequencing inbound to that airport and assigning the arrival runway. Once you get there, you'll land, you'll taxi clear the runway, and you'll be issued taxi instructions. They'll take you right to your gate, but that's basically how the process works.
Wow. And I thought that the pilot was in control of the whole flight.
Well, the pod is ultimately responsible for the safe operation of his or her airplane. However, they are required to adhere to air traffic control instructions. Just like when you're driving your car, there are certain signs along the way that basically tell you what you're required to do. As you get to a busy intersection, you may have to slow the car down. If there's a red light, you have to stop because you're trying to accommodate other cars, because you're not the only car out there. And that's pretty much the way your air traffic control system works. There are control instructions that are issued because you're not the only airplane out there.
Do you get tickets?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. So in the future, will air traffic control be much different than it is today?
I think so. We're of course not building more airports. We're not building many more runways either, so we have to optimize the use of the facilities that we currently have. And to that end, NASA is looking at cutting-edge concepts and technologies to make better utilization of those facilities, both in terms of capacity, that is to say the number of airplanes you can get in and out of an airport at a given time, and safety as well. And these are just some of the concepts that have been explored by NASA and continue to be explored.
Really? I got a question. How do you change the channel on this? I mean, do you have cable on this thing?
That's all for this edition of Destination Tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. I'm Steele McGonigal.
And I'm Kara O'Brien. For all of us here at NASA, we'll see you next time.
Hello, welcome back to the show, and now on to your marine forecast. Let's start out with the ice edge. Basically, we're seeing some growth in the ice edge as we had a little bit more of a northeasterly flow over the last 24 hours there in the Bering. We do have some areas that are breaking up along the western areas of the waters to the north, and we're just seeing, you know, this breaking up. So you'll see some seas being introduced there. Across the Cook Inlet, we're not seeing much change in the sea ice, the thickness ranging between 1 to 3 inches still in the northern inlet. Now let's go take a look at your southeastern forecast for Thursday, looking at primarily a lighter flow with out of the northern channel, seeing a north flow switching around to the south with primarily southeasterly flow for the outside waters between 10 to 20 knots across the area. Inner channels will see seas between 3 to 4 feet, and the outer waters will be between 4 to 6 feet. Looking at your Friday forecast, a pickup in wind speeds with small crafts across much of the area, winds ranging between the 15 to 25 knot range. Seas across the inner channels that day will be between 3 to 5 feet, and the outer waters, higher seas that day between 7 and 12 feet. Looking out your south central forecast, a northerly flow still light on your Thursday forecast between 10 to 15 knots across the area. Seas across Prince William Sound, the northern inlet between 2 to 3 feet, and then across the Gulf waters around 3 to 4 feet, including the Shelikof Strait. Looking at a change for your Friday forecast with wind speeds picking up for these areas as well as low pressure develops to the south. And we'll see mainly small craft, 25 to 30 knots across much of the area. It's up to the north, 15 knot winds there out of the north. Looking at the seas across the Gulf, 7 to 9 feet, and then 8 feet across the southern inlet and towards the Shelikof Strait, and 5-foot seas there to the north. Looking at 3 feet across Prince William Sound that day. Now across the Alaska Peninsula on your Thursday, looking for those lighter speeds between 15 to 20 knots out of the east direction. Seas on that day will range between 2 to 5 feet, highest to the south. In the Pacific. And then on your Friday, looking at an increase in wind speeds, small craft right there just to the southeastern side of the Alaska Peninsula. Seas on that day will be 4 feet on the Bering side and then 9 to 10 feet on the Pacific side. And then looking at your Thursday forecast across much of the Aleutians, light wind speeds there out of the east direction towards the west, and we'll see gales out towards the west along that developing system. Seas on that day will be highest to 15 feet across the western Aleutians, with seas around 4 to 6 feet across the eastern and central Aleutians. Looking at your Friday forecast, increase of wind speed across all these areas. So look for gales on this day, with the seas between 12 to 18 feet across the area. Lower seas there to the eastern Alaska areas between 4 to 5 feet. For your west coast on Thursday, light wind speeds here out of the north to east flow, and we'll see seas between 1 to 5 feet, changing with the wind direction being primarily east to southeast on this day. Small crafts out towards St. Matthew Island there, and seas between 3 to 7 feet. Now for your northern coast forecast and northwest, looking for the lighter wind speeds between 10 to 20 knots for these areas. And here across the Kotzebue Sound, we also are seeing some open water there with seas 3 feet, as well as Friday. And then an easterly flow across the entire area between 5 to 20 knots, lightest wind speeds up there to the north near Wainwright. Now looking at your forecast in just a real quick brief, we have the higher wind speeds across the central interior will be dropping off by Thursday morning. As ridge begins to drop south tonight, we'll see the visibilities dropping there to 1/4 of a mile or less. Across the east, we'll see some showery conditions continue, mainly as rain. Cold conditions below freezing overnight for much of the southern areas of the state. Low pressure there spinning out in the eastern Bering, and another storm just out to the west approaching the western Aleutians. A very strong warm system there through your Thursday. And then about towards the southeast, this trough will be swinging back towards south central through your Friday forecast, with another system developing out of the North Pacific and coming to the north for the Gulf. So look for gales that during the weekend, with mainly clear skies across the interior. Have a great night. We'll see you back here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.